Melachim Beit, or 2 Kings, chapter 1. And Moab revolted against Israel after the death of Ahab, and Ahaziah fell through the lattice of his upper room in Shomeron and was injured, and sent messengers and said to them, "Go inquire of Baal Zebub, the mighty one of Ekron, if I shall recover from this injury." But a messenger of YHVH spoke to Eliyahu the Tishbite, "Rise up, go up to meet the messengers of the sovereign of Shomeron, and say to them, is it because there is no Elohim in Israel that you are going to inquire of Baal Zebub, the mighty one of Ekron? So therefore, thus said YHVH, you are not going to get out of the bed to which you have gone up, for you shall certainly die." And Eliyahu went, and the messengers returned to him, and he said to them, "Why have you come back?" And they said to him, "A man came up to meet us and said to us, 'Go, return to the sovereign who sent you, and say to him, thus said YHVH, is it because there is no Elohim in Israel that you are sending to inquire of Baal Zebub, the mighty one of Ekron? Therefore you're not going to get out of the bed to which you've gone up, for you shall certainly die." And he said to them, "What was the man like who came up to meet you and spoke to you these words?" And they answered him, "He was a hairy man, and he wore a leather girdle around his waist." And he said, "It is Eliyahu the Tishbite." Then he sent to him a captain of 50 with his 50 men, and he went up to him, and see, he was sitting on top of a hill, and he spoke to him, "Man of Elohim, the sovereign has said, come down." And Eliyahu answered and said to the captain of 50, "And if I am a man of Elohim, let fire come down from the heavens and consume you and your 50 men. And fire came down from the heavens and consumed him and his 50. And he then sent another captain of 50 with his 50 men to him, and he answered and said to him, "Man of Elohim, this is what the sovereign said, come down at once." And Eliyahu answered and said to them, "If I am a man of Elohim, let fire come down from the heavens and consume you and your 50 men. And a fire of Elohim came down from the heavens and consumed him and his 50. And again, he sent a third captain of 50 with his 50 men. And the third captain of 50 went up and came and fell on his knees before Eliyahu and pleaded with him and said to him, "Man of Elohim, please let my life and the life of these 50 servants of yours be precious in your eyes. See, fire has come down from the heavens and burned up the first 2 captains of 50s with their 50s. But let my life be precious in your eyes." And the messenger of YHVH said to Eliyahu, "Go down with him, do not be afraid of him." So he rose up and went down with him to the sovereign and spoke to him, "Thus said YHVH, because you have sent messengers to inquire of Baal Zebub, the mighty one of Ekron, is it because there is no Elohim in Israel to inquire of his word? Therefore, you're not going to get up out of the bed to which you've gone up, for you shall certainly die." And he died, according to the word of YHVH, which Eliyahu had spoken. And Jehoram reigned in his place in the 2nd year of Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, sovereign of Yehudah, for he had no son. And the rest of the acts of Ahaziah, which he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the sovereigns of Israel? Chapter 2. And it came to be when YHVH was to take up Eliyahu to the heavens by a whirlwind, that Eliyahu went with Elisha from Gilgal. And Eliyahu said to Elisha, Please remain here, for Yehovah has sent me on to Bethel. And Elisha said, As Yehovah lives and as your being lives, I do not leave you. And they went down to Bethel. And the sons of the prophets who were at Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, Do you know that Yehovah is taking away your master from your head? And he said, I also know. Be silent. And Eliyahu said to him, Elisha, please remain here, for Yehovah has sent me on to Jericho. And he said, As Yehovah lives and as your being lives, I do not leave you. And they came into Jericho. And the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho came to Elisha and said to him, Do you know that Yehovah is taking away your master from over you today? And he said, I also know. Be silent. And Eliyahu said to him, Please remain here, for Yehovah has sent me on to the Jordan. And he said, As Yehovah lives and as your being lives, I do not leave you. And the two of them went on. And 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood facing them at a distance, while the two of them stood by the Jordan. And Eliyahu took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. And it was divided this way and that, so that the two of them passed over on dry ground. And it came to be, when they had passed over, that Eliyahu said to Elisha, Ask what I am to do for you before I'm taken away from you. And Elisha said, Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me. And he said, You've made it hard to ask, yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it's yours. But if not, it is not. And it came to be, as they continued on and spoke, that see, a chariot of fire with horses of fire, which separated the two of them. And Eliyahu went up by a whirlwind into the heavens, and Elisha saw it. And he cried out, My father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen. And he saw him no more. And he took hold of his garments and tore them into 2 pieces. And he took up the mantle of Eliyahu that had fallen from him, and went back and stood at the bank of the Jordan. And he took the mantle of Eliyahu that had fallen from him, and struck the water, and said, Where is Yehovah Elohim of Eliyahu? And he struck the water, and it was divided this way and that, and Elisha passed over. And when the sons of the prophets who were from Jericho saw him, they said, The spirit of Eliyahu rests on Elisha. And they came to meet him and bowed down to the ground before him. And they said to him, Look, there are 50 strong men with your servants. Please let them go and search for your master, lest the spirit of Yehovah has taken him up and cast him upon some mountain or in some valley. And he said, Send no one. But they pressed upon him until he was ashamed, and he said, Send. So they sent 50 men, and they searched for 3 days, but they did not find him. And they returned to him, for he remained in Jericho. And he said to them, Did I not say to you, Don't go? And the men of the city said to Elisha, Look, the site of this city is good, as my master sees, but the waters are spoilt and the soil barren. And he said, Bring me a new bowl and put salt in it. And they brought it to him. And he went out to the source of the water and threw salt in there and said, Thus said Yehovah, I have healed this water. No longer shall death or barrenness come from it. And the waters were healed to this day, according to the word of Elisha, which he spoke. And he went up from there to Bethel. And as he was going up the way, some youths from the city came and mocked him and said to him, Go up, bald head, go up, baldy. And he turned around and looked at them and pronounced a curse on them in the name of Yehovah. And 2 female bears came out of the forest and tore to pieces 42 of the youths. And from there he went to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Shomeron. Chapter 3. And Jehoram, son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel at Shomeron in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, sovereign of Yehudah, and reigned 12 years. And he did evil in the eyes of Yehovah, but not like his father and mother, for he removed the statue of Baal, which his father had made, but he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin. He did not turn away from them. And Mesha, sovereign of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he paid the sovereign of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. And it came to be when Ahab died that the sovereign of Moab revolted against the sovereign of Israel. And the sovereign Jehoram went out of Shomeron at that time and mustered all Israel. And he went and sent to Jehoshaphat, sovereign of Yehudah, saying, The sovereign of Moab has revolted against me. Do you go with me to fight against Moab? And he said, I go up, I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. And he said, Which way do we go up? And he said, By way of the wilderness of Edom. And the sovereign of Israel went, and the sovereign of Yehudah, and the sovereign of Edom, and went round a journey of 7 days, and there was no water for the army, nor for the cattle that followed them. And the sovereign of Israel said, What? Has Yehovah called these 3 sovereigns to give them into the hand of Moab? And Jehoshaphat said, Is there no prophet of Yehovah here? Then let us inquire of Yehovah through him. One of the servants of the sovereigns of Israel then answered and said, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here, who poured water out on the hands of Eliyahu. And Jehoshaphat said, The word of Yehovah is with him. And the sovereign of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the sovereign of Edom went down to him. And Elisha said to the sovereign of Israel, What have I to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. And the sovereign of Israel said to him, No, for Yehovah has called these 3 sovereigns to give them into the hand of Moab. And Elisha said, As Yehovah of hosts lives, before whom I stand, if it were not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, sovereign of Yehudah, I would not even look at you, nor see you. And now bring me a harpist. And it came to be when the harpist played, that the hand of Yehovah came upon him. And he said, Thus said Yehovah, make this wadi ditches. Ditches. For thus said Yehovah, you're not going to see wind nor rain yet. That wadi is to be filled with water, so that you, your cattle, and your beasts shall drink. And this shall be but a light matter in the eyes of Yehovah. And he shall give Moab into your hand, and you shall strike every walled city and every choice city, and shall cut down every good tree, and stop up every fountain of water, and ruin every good piece of land with stones. And it came to be in the morning, when the grain offering was offered, that see, water came by way of Edom, and the land was filled with water. And when all Moab heard that the sovereigns had come up to fight against them, all who were able to bear arms and older were gathered, and they stood at the border. And the sun rose up early in the morning, and the sun was shining on the water. And the Moabites saw the water on the other side as red as blood. And they said, This is blood. The sovereigns have indeed struck swords and have killed one another. And now, Moab, to the spoil. And they came to the camp of Israel, and Israel rose up and struck the Moabites, so they fled before them, and striking, they struck the Moabites, and they broke down the cities, and each man threw a stone on every good piece of land and filled it, and they stopped up all the fountains of water and cut down all the good trees, until only the stones of Kir Hareseth was left. And the slingers went round and struck it. And when the sovereign of Moab saw that the battle was too strong for him, he took with him 700 men who drew swords to break through to the sovereign of Edom. But they could not. Then took his eldest son, who would have reigned in his place, and offered him as an ascending offering up upon the wall. And there was great wrath against Israel, and they left him and returned to the land. Chapter 4. And a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared YHVH. And the lender has come to take my 2 sons to be his slaves. And Elisha said to her, What should I do for you? Inform me. What do you have in the house? And she said, Your female servant has none at all in the house, except a pot of oil. And he said, Go, borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not get a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. Then pour it into all those vessels and set aside the filled ones. And she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her. Then she poured it out. And it came to be, when the vessels were filled, that she said to her son, Bring me another vessel. And he said to her, There's not another vessel. And the oil ceased. So she went and informed the man of Elohim, and he said, Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest. And it came to be, on a day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a prominent woman, and she took hold of him to eat some food. And it came to be, as often as he passed by, that he turned in there to eat some food. And she said to her husband, Look, I know that this is a set-apart man of Elohim who passes by us continually. Please let us make a small upper room on the wall, and let us put a bed for him there, and a table and a chair and a lampstand. And it shall be, whenever he comes to us, let him turn in there. And it came to be on that day that he came there, and he turned into the upper room and lay down there. And he said to Gehazi, his servant, Call this Shunammite woman. So he called her, and she stood before him. And he said to him, Please say to her, Look, you've gone to all this trouble for us. What is there to be done for you? Should I speak on your behalf to the sovereign or to the commander of the army? And she answered, I'm dwelling among my own people. And he said, What is there to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Well, she has no son, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. So he called her, and she stood in the doorway. And he said, About this appointed time next year, you shall embrace a son. And she said, No, my master, man of Elohim, do not lie to your female servant. And the woman conceived and bore a son, and when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had spoken to her, and the child grew, and it came to be on a day that he went out to his father, to the reapers, and said to his father, My head, my head. And he said to his servant, Take him to his mother. So he took him and brought him to his mother. And he sat down on her knees till noon and died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of Elohim and shut the door on him and went out. And she said to her husband and said, "Please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys so that I hurry to the man of Elohim and return." And he said, "Why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath." And she said, "It is well." And she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Drive and go. Do not slow down except I speak to you." And she went and came to the man of Elohim at Mount Carmel. And it came to be when the man of Elohim saw her at a distance, that he said to his servant Gehazi, "See the Shunammite woman. Please run now to meet her and say to her, 'Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with your child?'" And she answered, "It is well." And she came to the man of Elohim at the hill, and she took hold of him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to push her away, but the man of Elohim said, "Leave her alone, for her being is bitter in her, and YHVH has hidden it from me and has not revealed it to me." And she said, "Did I ask a son of my master? Did I not say, 'Do not deceive me'?" And he said to Gehazi, "Gird up your loins and take my staff in your hand and go. When you meet anyone, do not greet him, and when anyone greets you, do not answer him. And you shall lay my staff on the face of the child." And the mother of the child said, "As YHVH lives, and as your being lives, I do not leave you." And he rose and followed her. And Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the face of the child. But there was no voice, and there was no hearing. So he went back to meet him and reported to him, saying, "The child has not awakened." And Elisha came into the house, saw the child was dead, laying on his bed. And he went in and shut the door behind the two of them and prayed to YHVH. And he went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his hands on his hands, and stretched himself out on the child. And the flesh of the child became warm. And he returned and walked back and forth in the house, and went up and stretched himself out on him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite." So he called her, and she came in to him. And he said, "Pick up your son." Then she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground and picked up her son and went out. And Elisha returned to Gilgal, and the scarcity of food was in the land, and the sons of the prophets were sitting before him. And he said to his servants, "Put on the large pot and cook stew for the sons of the prophets." And one went out in the field to gather plants, and found a wild vine, and gathered wild cucumbers from it, filling the skirt of his garment, and came and sliced them into the pot of stew, though they did not know what they were. They then served it to the men to eat, and it came to be as they were eating the stew that they cried out and said, "Oh, man of Elohim, there is death in the pot," and they were unable to eat it. And he said, "Then bring some flour." And he put into the pot and said, "Serve it to the people to eat." And there was no evil matter in the pot. Now, a man came from Baal Shalishah and brought the man of Elohim bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley bread, and newly ripened grain in his knapsack. And he said, "Give it to the people to eat." And his servant said, "What? Do I set this before 100 men? And he said, "Give it to the people to eat. For thus said YHVH, eat, and have some left over." And he set it before them, and they ate, and had some left over, according to the word of YHVH.